Alrighty, guys. Good morning. Welcome. Glad to see you guys today. So today we're going to be doing the document B part of the Louisiana Purchase primary sources. So yesterday you should have gone over this timeline already. You should have gone over document A, which is Alexander Hamilton writing about his opposition to the Louisiana Purchase. Let's go ahead and look at document B and go over this together, right? So document B, letters by Federalists. Now, obviously, it's a modified version, just like the first one. We scroll all the way down to the bottom of this page. We'll see this italicized part right here, which tells us where the source comes from. These are two letters above are written by two Federalists. Rufus King was a senator from New York, and Timothy Pickering was a senator from Massachusetts. So these are two Northern senators. They are both Federalists, and they are both in opposition to the Louisiana Purchase. The fact that they are Northerners is going to prove to be important, as we'll find out. So let's read this first part of the letter from Rufus King to Thomas Pickering. Right, it's written on November 4th, 1803, so right before the deal was finalized. According to the Constitution, Congress may admit new states, but can the president sign treaties forcing Congress to do so? All right, so right here, he's basically kind of asking a question right here. He's claiming, like, look, according to the Constitution, Congress may admit new states. That is explicitly stated in the Constitution that Congress can create new states. Excuse me. But he's asking the question, can the president sign treaties forcing Congress to do so? Can the president sign a treaty like the Louisiana Purchase that would eventually, excuse me. Try saying that again. He's basically asking the question, can the president sign a treaty like the Louisiana Purchase that would force Congress to make states if they didn't want to in the first place? So he's kind of proposing a question here. Let's move on to the second paragraph right here. According to the Louisiana Treaty, the territory must be formed into state and admitted into the Union. Will Congress be allowed to set any rules for their admission? Since slavery is legal and exists in Louisiana, and the treaty states that we must protect the property of the inhabitants, won't we be forced to admit the new states as slave states? Doing so will worsen the problem of unequal representation from slave and free states. So a few things are being said in this paragraph. Go ahead and highlight that right there. The territory must be formed into states and admitted into the Union. So according to the Louisiana Treaty, the Louisiana Purchase, all land that is bought from the French must eventually be turned into states, must be eventually divided up into states. This goes back to the question that he was asking before. Can Congress be forced to to admit states? All right, so here we got the first issue that they have, right? So here on the side, right here, where I'm circling, we can write Congress is being forced to admit states, right? When usually it's up to Congress to make that decision. So that's what we can write right here. Congress is being forced to admit states. Let's move on. Will Congress be allowed to set any rules for their admission? Since slavery is legal and exists in Louisiana, and the treaty states that we must protect the property of the inhabitants, won't we be forced to admit the new states as slave states? Doing so will worsen the problem of unequal representation from slave and free states. So he's proposing a question. He's saying, look, slavery is legal in Louisiana. France made it legal in Louisiana. He's asking, does that mean every single state that comes into this territory is going to be a slave state, right? He's saying that the treaty must protect the property of its inhabitants, right? That's very disgusting rhetoric that was used at the time. They would refer to slaves as property. Like I said, very disgusting, very gross, very evil rhetoric there. So that's what he means right there. So he's asking the question, do we have to admit every single state as a slave state? And doing so, go ahead and highlight this, will worsen the problem of unequal representation from slave and free states. In other words, He's claiming that if we admit every single one of these states as a slave state, excuse me, I have something stuck in my throat. If we admit every single one of these states as a slave state, that's going to give the slave states more representation in Congress, and therefore they're going to get more power. So here to the side right here, we can write that slave states will have more power. Slave states will have more power. So it's kind of giving you guys, presenting two issues here. Number one issue, the president is forcing Congress to admit new states into the Union when that is completely supposed to be Congress's decision. Then over here, he's claiming that by admitting every one of those states as a slave state, you're giving the slave power more power. Let's look at Timothy Pickering's reply, which came November, I don't know, a couple months after. Math is hard. 4 months after. Just remember, mail and transportation is very slow at this time. So let's see what Timothy Pickering, another northern senator, has to say. I am disgusted with the men who now rule us. The coward at the head, he's talking about Jefferson, is like a French revolutionary. While he talks about humanity, he enjoys the utter destruction of his opponents. We have too long witnessed his great wickedness, his cruel removal of faithful officers, and the substitution of corruption and immorality for honesty. Excuse me. So basically, in this letter right here, Timothy's kind of using a lot more heated rhetoric to describe Jefferson, right? He's calling him wicked. He's calling him a French revolutionary, which was not a compliment back then. Claiming he destroys the utter destruction of his opponents. The Federalist Party is very weak at this point, very unpopular at this point. Calling him wicked. I think his reasons why, right? So these are kind of like his reasons why he's calling Jefferson all these things. His cruel removal of faithful officers and the substitution of corruption and immorality for honesty. So cruel removal of faithful officers, right? He's accusing Jefferson of, he's accusing Jefferson of kind of surrounding himself around people that will get what he wants to be done. Not necessarily people who are faithful to, say, the country, is what he is arguing. And also he's claiming that Jefferson claims to be honest when in reality he's very corrupt and very immoral. All right, so in other words, Timothy is kind of agreeing with everything that Rufus has to say. It's just kind of taking it a step further with a lot more heated rhetoric. So you've already done the graphic organizer part for document A. So go ahead and make sure you do the graphic organizer part for document B. And then make sure you get that turned in. If you have any questions, let me or your other teacher know on Canvas. Have a wonderful rest of your day, guys.